Joining me now is former Defense Secretary and CIA Director under President Obama, Leon Panetta. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for joining us. The will of the Ukrainian people has been nothing short of remarkable. We just saw that video right there where the gentleman was telling one of our reporters the Molotov cocktails came from the apartment building across the street. So the Ukrainian citizens are certainly pitching in. But what's your reaction to this news about the town in southern Ukraine that was taken by the Russians, about 100,000 people in that town, in a small naval base? It does show that the Russians are advancing.
Well, look, there's no question. We understood from the beginning the overwhelming force that the Russians were using as they invaded the Ukraine. But the encouraging thing is that the Ukrainians are putting up a hell of a fight. We've always known that fighters who are dedicated to their cause sometimes are much better fighters than those who are invading, like the Russians. I think that even though you're going to see some towns fall, what I'm impressed by is that the Ukrainians continue to stall the Russian advance. And I think that's an important message that they need to continue to work at.
Yeah, I was just speaking with a Western diplomatic official here in Washington who was saying there's no question the resistance has been stronger than what was anticipated. And a Ukrainian general says they've captured about 200 Russian soldiers, that some of them were 19 years old, not trained at all, badly equipped. There have been reports of Russian soldiers becoming disoriented, saying, we don't know who to shoot, they all look like us. What does that tell you?
Well, look, I think the most important thing for the United States and our NATO allies is to continue to try to isolate Putin. And we're doing that. We're doing that, obviously, with sanctions, but we're also seeing that Putin himself, in many ways, is isolated from the Russian people in terms of their concerns about going to war. In addition to that, I think it's really important right now that we continue to provide military aid to the Ukrainians so that they can continue this fight. They need ammo, they need fuel, they obviously need food. We need to help supply them with what they need in order to carry on this fight. The longer that fight goes on, the more isolated Putin will be and the more vulnerable Putin will be.
They certainly need more than Molotov cocktails, that's for sure. And the Russians are supposed to meet with the Ukrainian delegation at the Belarus border tomorrow, but at the same time, I need to get your reaction on this, Mr. Secretary. Putin putting his deterrence forces, as they call them, his nuclear arsenal on high alert. I mean, Ukraine doesn't have a nuclear force. This is just saber rattling. What's going on?
Jim, I view what Putin said here as a sign of weakness, not a sign of strength. If things were going well, there would be no need for him to even raise that kind of threat to the world and to the Ukraine. He's obviously trying to send a signal to the United States and to our NATO allies. But I think it's very important that Putin should understand how strong we are when it comes to nuclear deterrence. We've got a three-pronged nuclear deterrent that can respond to any threat. And I think it's important that he understands that if he tries to do anything that might involve nuclear weapons, that he is ending not only the Putin reign, but his regime as well.
And the Ukrainian President Zelensky says what Russia is doing shows signs of genocide, and that this isn't just about Ukraine, it's about the beginning of a wider war against Europe. He's calling on citizens all over the world to come and take up arms and fight with the Ukrainians. I mean, some of that obviously is not going to happen, but this leadership that Zelensky has shown in all of this courage, this passion that he has shown, has it taken you by surprise?
Well, I certainly give him tremendous credit for the leadership he's showing. I think we've always known that leadership is tested in crisis. and he has really responded to this crisis as the leader of a country that obviously is being invaded by a much stronger country in Russia. Uh, but I think his leadership is very important to trying to inspire Ukrainians to get out there and resist. I think ultimately the ability to develop a resistance movement within Ukraine, and let's face it, that's what's going to happen, even if the Russians take over more towns. What's going to happen is that Ukrainians are not going to accept Russian rule. And I don't see the Russians end game here. I think it's only trouble for the Russians, for them to think that somehow they're going to be able to bring Ukraine under their thumb. It isn't going to happen.
And the European Union apparently is moving forward with authorizing the purchase, the funding of purchasing of weapons for the first time to help Ukraine. Your thoughts on that? That's a big step.
I think that's a very important step. I think it's very important now for the United States, for our European allies, to continue to provide strong military aid to the Ukrainians and getting them to them any way we can. They need help to be able to resist what is clearly overwhelming, military force. But these are fighters. They're tough fighters, and they're fighting for a cause they believe in. And I think if they can continue to put up a strong resistance and stall the Russian aggression in the Ukraine, what that means is it will further isolate Putin in terms of what he's trying to accomplish. And that, I think, should be our primary strategy.